There are certain issues and nuances to keep in mind when working in the UCPath PayPath module. This video is to show two of the most common nuances to keep in mind. When a transaction is entered into PayPath and there is a row after it with a higher effective date, whether it is a historical row that is being added or if there is a future dated row in the system, PayPath will add a system-generated row over each row with a higher effective date. Sometimes this is valid and doesn't require any additional changes, such as if there is a pay increase and you want to carry forward over a supervisor change, for example. Other times, the system-generated row may not account for the needed change. For example, if a pay increase is added and the system-generated row overrides a future dated pay increase, then the employee is not receiving the increase that was intended when the future dated row was entered. The second element we are discussing is how the system is currently adjusting the job earnings distribution and carrying back the most future dated row. So if the employee is currently on ARIT, but there is a future dated row ending the employee's ARIT, so there is no job earnings distribution, if a transaction is entered before the employee returns from ARIT, the system will carry back the job earnings distribution for the most future dated row and remove the necessary ARIT distribution from the current row. This is also true if the most future dated row has a JED distribution, but the current distribution is 100% regular pay. If a transaction is entered for the current date, the JED distribution will automatically be applied from that future dated row. The best way to mitigate these issues is to follow a 1-2-3 check for each PayPath transaction. Before the transaction, check the workforce job summary and ask 3 questions. Is there a current or future dated JED distribution? Does a future dated row exist? Am I going to be inserting a row between 2 other rows which have already been entered? If the answer to any of these questions was yes, then after the transaction is submitted and approved, review the workforce job summary to ensure that the JED or jobs earning distribution and the salary and compensation fields are correct. If there was an issue with any of the newly entered data rows in workforce job summary, then add a new row or submit a case or inquiry on behalf of the employee with the appropriately attached position update or job data update form. Let's look at an example that demonstrates both of these nuances and follow the 3-step process. Let's start by navigating to PayPath, where the transaction needs to be entered. So we're going to start with the main menu, UC Customizations, UC Extensions, PayPath Actions, enter the employee ID, and click Search. Click on the Job Data tab and select the Workforce Job Summary in the top right corner. The page will open in a new tab and show all the current job data rows that exist. As of today, February 14th, 2022, there are historical rows currently in the system. Going through the questions, is there a current or future JED distribution? Yes, because there is an ARIT row, which is entered into the system using JED. Does a future dated row exist? Yes, there are 2 future dated rows, one for 1/29/2023 and one for 6/26/2023. Am I going to be inserting a row between 2 other rows which have already been entered? Yes, if I enter a row for today, February 14th, 2022, it will be entered between the 6/27/2021 row and the 1/29/2023 row. If the answer to at least one of these 3 questions was yes, then the workforce job summary needs to be checked once the transaction has been submitted and approved. So I'll enter the merit increase with the effective date set for today, 2/14/2022. Then an approver would go in and review the transaction and approve. Once it is approved, you could pull the same record in PayPath and open Workforce Job Summary through the Job Data tab. Or you could just navigate to the Workforce Job Summary by selecting Main Menu, Workforce Administration, Job Information, Review Job Information, and then select Workforce Job Summary. This will take you to the same page. When you look at this now, you can look through the tabs, or you can click this icon to expand the page into one table. The table can also be exported to Excel for additional analysis if needed. by returning the display to the tabbed view and clicking the sheet icon. Let's review each of the rows. Because the 21422 row was entered, the system entered a new top of stack row over the future dated rows. These have an action change of data change and a reason code of sys update PayPath action. The 129-2023 row was entered to return the employee from Erit. The updated pay rate is applicable here, and the JED distribution should not be included on the row. The 626-23 row was put in as a pay rate increase. The system entered row 62623 overrides the pay with the updated amount from the merit increase. An additional transaction would be needed to add a new top of stack row with a 62623 effective date, which would include the appropriate pay increase for the across-the-board increase. If no additional transaction is entered, then the employee would not receive the appropriate across-the-board increase. Regarding the question of JED and if it has been appropriately adjusted, let's look at the 62721 row by selecting Earnings Distribution. Here you can see the employee has a 20% Erit. Click OK to return to the previous page. Let's check the 21422 row where the merit was added by clicking Earnings Distribution for that row. Here you can see that the JED is no longer calculated at the bottom and the employee is at 100% regular pay. This happened because the system is pulling the job earnings distribution from the highest dated row that has been entered. In this case, a future dated row for 626-2023. If this is not corrected, the employee could be overpaid. On to step 3 of the process. After the review, it is clear that 2 fixes need to be enacted. One to correct the compensation for the 626-23 row, and one to correct the JED for the February 14th, 2022 row. To make these corrections, add a new row or submit a case or inquiry on behalf of the employee with the appropriately attached position update or job update form. Please be aware, these are not the only known nuances or defects currently in PayPath. For additional information, please review the PayPath FAQs at ucpath.berkeley.edu/FAQ and the Known Issues log, which is available on the Berkeley Transactional User page at ucpath.berkeley.edu/transactional-users. Additional resources and tip sheets are also available on the Berkeley UCPath training page. Thank you for joining us today for this quick walkthrough video.